The floor never stops. In 1923, dance instructor Alma Cummings helped spark a national obsession when she danced for 27 straight hours in New York. Promoters saw the potential immediately. If people would pay attention to endurance dancing, then endurance itself could be sold. At first, dance marathons looked like jazz-age novelty. Then the Great Depression arrived, and the format changed. For many contestants, these events were not glamorous stunts. They were survival. Organizers promised food, shelter, and a chance at prize money. Desperate people signed up because staying in the contest meant staying indoors. Audiences paid to watch contestants deteriorate in public. Couples shuffled in circles while bands played, MCs joked, and judges enforced punishing rules. Competitors had to stay in motion for most of every hour, day and night, with only short breaks. Sleep deprivation became part of the spectacle. So did injury, hallucination, and collapse. The danger was real from the beginning. In April 1923, a contestant named Homer Morehouse collapsed after an extreme endurance effort and died, becoming one of the earliest notorious casualties associated with the craze. Public officials began asking whether these events were contests or simply profitable abuse. One of the best-known names on the circuit was Gladys Lenz, who became a symbol of how brutal the marathon scene had become. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, dance marathons were drawing huge crowds across the country, and cities increasingly moved to restrict or ban them. Washington state outlawed them in 1937. Still, the records kept growing. One documented marathon lasted 3,780 hours, roughly 5 months. It was marketed as endurance. In reality, it showed how easily human suffering could be turned into paid entertainment, and audiences kept paying anyway. The woman who died for a gaming console. Decades later, the setting changed. The logic did not. On January 12, 2007, Jennifer Strange, a 28-year-old mother of 3 from Rancho Cordova, California, went to the studios of Sacramento radio station KDND-FM. The station, known as 107.9 The End, was running a contest called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. The prize was a Nintendo Wii. Strange wanted to win it for her children. 18 contestants took part. The premise was brutally simple. Drink as much water as possible without going to the bathroom. Whoever lasted the longest would win. As the morning went on, Strange drank large amounts of water and began complaining that her head hurt. On air, the hosts joked about the contestants' discomfort. During the broadcast, a nurse called in to warn that drinking too much water too quickly could be fatal. The show continued. Strange finished second and left with a smaller consolation prize. After returning home, she was found dead. The Sacramento County coroner ruled that she died of acute water intoxication. When the body takes in far more water than it can process, sodium levels in the blood can drop dangerously low. Cells swell. The brain swells. The consequences can be catastrophic. Entercom Sacramento fired 10 employees, including the station manager and the on-air personalities involved. In 2009, a California jury awarded Strange's family more than $16.5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. What makes the case unforgettable is not just the absurdity of dying for a game console. It is how casual the setup was. No giant jackpot, no life-changing cash prize. Just a consumer gadget, a room full of adults, and a radio format built on pushing discomfort until it became tragedy. When eating became a spectacle, eating contests offered sponsors. Another perfect formula: cheap, loud, and impossible to ignore. Give people a pile of food, a stopwatch, and a crowd, and somebody will try to turn self-harm into applause. No contest became more famous than Nathan's famous hot dog eating contest on Coney Island. For years, it was promoted as a tradition dating back to 1916. But later reporting showed that origin story was largely a marketing myth. The first clearly documented versions of the contest appear much later, around the early 1970s. Even so, Nathan's helped define the modern format. Brand sponsorship, television coverage, rankings, records, and gastrointestinal punishment presented like sport. The medical risks were never imaginary. Doctors had long warned that competitive eating could lead to choking, aspiration, stomach injury, and dangerous overexpansion of the digestive system. Research on elite eaters suggested that repeated training could alter how the stomach functions, allowing it to stretch to disturbing extremes. And sometimes the danger ended in death. Promotional eating contests have produced fatal choking incidents, reminders that what looks ridiculous on stage can become irreversible in seconds. But the format survived because it delivered exactly what sponsors wanted: spectacle, headlines, and cheap attention. By the early 2000s, competitive eating had developed formal circuits and governing organizations with more than 100 sanctioned events each year in the United States. A carnival stunt had become a professional promotional machine, buying a fighter jet with soda points. In 1996, Pepsi ran one of the most famous commercials in American advertising. The ad ended with a teenager arriving at school in an AV-8 Harrier jump jet. On screen, the aircraft was labeled with a price in Pepsi points, $7 million. For most viewers, the joke was obvious. For John Leonard, a 21-year-old business student in Seattle, it was an opening. Pepsi's promotion allowed customers to buy additional points for 10 cents each. Leonard realized that if the offer were real, the jet could be claimed for far less than its actual value. He gathered investors, included the required minimum number of actual Pepsi points, and sent Pepsi an order form with a check for $708.50. Pepsi returned the check. Leonard sued. The case became famous because it asked an absurd but serious legal question. If a corporation advertises something outrageous, can it later insist that no reasonable person would believe it? In 1999, federal judge Kimba Wood ruled for Pepsi. No reasonable person, she concluded, could have believed the commercial offered an actual Harrier jet. It was a weapon of war worth many millions of dollars and subject to obvious legal barriers. The ad, in other words, was a joke. Legally, that mattered more than the number on the screen. Leonard lost the case, but he won a permanent place in advertising folklore. Pepsi later removed the Harrier gag from the campaign. The catalog kept selling jackets and T-shirts. It stopped pretending that enough soda could buy military air power. The man who rigged McDonald's monopoly. McDonald's monopoly looked democratic. Buy fries, peel the game piece, and maybe lunch turns into a car, a vacation, or a pile of cash. The promotion worked because it made millions of customers feel one lucky peel away from transformation, but for years, many of the biggest prizes were never truly available to ordinary customers. The game launched in 1987, and the rare winning pieces were supposed to be secured under tight controls. That responsibility eventually ran through Jerome Jacobson, a security executive tied to Simon Marketing, the company managing the promotion. Instead of protecting the prize pieces, Jacobson stole them. Over the 1990s, he diverted high-value winning tickets before they reached the public and distributed them through a network of relatives, associates, and intermediaries. The recipients claimed the prizes, kept a cut, and funneled money back through the scheme. McDonald's kept paying out, apparently unaware that many of its marquee winners had never obtained their pieces honestly. The illusion of chance remained intact for the public. In reality, many of the top prizes had already been rerouted before customers ever had a shot. The FBI eventually uncovered the fraud in an investigation called Operation Final Answer. In 2001, Jacobson and numerous co-conspirators were arrested. In 2004, he was sentenced to federal prison. The bottle cap that started a war. In 1992, Pepsi Philippines launched a promotion called Number Fever. Bottle caps were printed with 3-digit numbers, and each week one number would be announced as the winner. Match the number, and the cap could be worth cash. The top prize was 1 million Philippine pesos. For months, the campaign drove huge excitement and stronger sales. Then, on May 25th, Pepsi announced the winning number, 349. Because of a production error, the number had been printed on hundreds of thousands of caps. By the next morning, massive crowds were gathering at Pepsi facilities, many convinced they were suddenly entitled to the top prize. Pepsi had never intended to pay anything close to that scale of liability, and it refused to honor the flood of claims. The anger was immediate. Protests erupted. Delivery trucks were attacked. Facilities were damaged. In the unrest that followed, people were killed and many others were injured. Lawsuits and criminal complaints multiplied. What had started as a marketing promotion spiraled into one of the most disastrous brand crises in modern history. Pepsi eventually offered a small goodwill payment to holders of the disputed caps, far below the advertised jackpot. Many claimants rejected it. Courts later ruled that Pepsi was not legally required to honor the misprinted caps under the formal terms of the promotion. But legality did not erase the scale of the disaster. A bottle cap contest had escalated into riots, bombings, deaths, and years of litigation. These stories sound ridiculous because they are ridiculous. Dance until you collapse. Drink water until it kills you. Eat for applause. Sue for a fighter jet. Peel stickers from fries in a game that was secretly rigged. Trust a bottle cap enough to help trigger national unrest. But beneath the absurdity, the pattern stays the same. The prize changes. The branding changes. The decade changes. What remains is the machinery of attention, desire, spectacle, and the promise that one more round, one more peel, one more stunt might change your life. Sometimes the crowd laughs, sometimes the sponsor walks away, sometimes somebody dies. And that is why these contests and promotions still endure in memory. Not just because they were bizarre, but because they revealed something brutally ordinary about mass culture. If the reward is flashy enough, almost anything can be turned into entertainment. If you liked this video, hit subscribe for more like it, and let me know in the comments what you want to see next.